These theories were never disproven, only buried because they were too dangerous to keep remembering. You are not lying in bed, you are lying in a coffin of illusions, every blink of your eye. Just another shudder, click in the lie you call reality. What you're about to remember isn't fiction, it's the archive of everything you've been trained to forget. Your mind won't sleep tonight because it finally knows who's been dreaming it. 1. The sky isn't blue, and you've never seen the world you were taught the sky is blue. You were shown diagrams, filters, a rainbow of refraction. But no one told you that blue doesn't exist, not in the physical world, not in ancient texts, and maybe not in your brain. Let's start with Homer, in both the Iliad and the Odyssey. The word blue appears exactly 0 times. The sea is wind dark, the sky is metallic, and color itself bends around metaphor across ancient languages: Hebrew, Chinese, Japanese, Greek. The word blue was often absent. Why? Because you can't see what you don't have a word. For that, this isn't poetic exaggeration. In 2006, a study on the Himba tribe in Namibia revealed that, lacking a word for blue, they could not distinguish it from green event in controlled visual tests. Their eyes could physically see it. Their minds could not isolate it. A glitch in language, a trap in perception. So, ask yourself, if you only see what you can name, how much of the world has been withheld from you by vocabulary alone? But let's descend deeper. Even now, when you look at the sky, you are not seeing the color blue. You are seeing scattered wavelengths filtered through Rayleigh scattering, byproduct of sunlight's interaction with nitrogen and oxygen. It's not a color you see. It's a simulation your brain builds, an interpretive hallucination based on photons it never truly receives. No color is real. There are no colors in the external world. There are only waves. And even those are not really waves. They are probabilistic mathematical behaviors of particles that only exist when observed. Reality, in other words, is a game of permissions. What your senses and language allow you to believe is there. Let's add more. Collapse. Consider the electromagnetic spectrum. The visible range, what you call sight, is a fraction, not half, not a quarter, not a tenth, just 0.0035% of the spectrum. Imagine calling yourself aware while operating with less than 1% of what's there. Now think, what if ancient peoples weren't primitive, but simply sensitive to frequencies? You have lost. Ancient Egyptians described the pineal gland, the eye of Horus, as a channel of divine perception. The Greeks built temples, not just for gods, but for geometry, believing its proportions echoed the cosmic mind. Hindu yogis mapped vibrational centers in the human body long before neuroscience caught up. Were these just metaphors or early perceptions of information you've since been trained to tune out? You live in a spectrum prison. Your ears hear only a slice of sound. Your eyes only a sliver of light. Your thoughts, fed through language, are pinned down by the definitions that structure your reality. And so, what you call consciousness is really just an interface limitation. You don't perceive the world. You decode what little of it your biology and language allow. Here's the twist. Science proves this. And yet science is the very thing that taught you to trust your senses. You trust that trees are green and apples are red, but color is nothing but your brain interpreting the way surfaces reject certain wavelengths. So the red apple is not Reddit, is the one object that rejects all red. The world you see is made entirely of what is bounced away from you. Your reality, then, is a mirror of rejection. What you see is never the thing enters. what the thing refuses. And yet, you go on, trusting your eyes, organizing your life, making your meaning, as if perception were reality, as if this fragile neurological Rube Goldberg machine of cones and rods and linguistic filters was showing you the truth. But if your senses are this compromised, this limited, this prone to suggestion, what else? In your life is built on interpretation disguised as truth. Was color your first illusion or your last? What happens when you realize that nothing you've ever seen was ever really there? 2. Memory is a lie you tell yourself. You think you remember your childhood. You think you remember your first love, your first failure, the texture of your grandfather's voice, the cold sharpness of a hospital waiting room. But what you carry with you is not memory. It is a story you've re-edited so many times, it no longer resembles anything that happened. Let's dismantle this with precision. In 1974, psychologists Elizabeth Loftus and John Palmer conducted a study that would fracture the very idea of memory. 2 groups watched the same video of a car accident. One group was asked, how fast were the cars going when they hit each other? Another was asked, how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other? The second group, consistently, reported higher speeds. Many even remembered seeing shattered glass, though none existed. A single word rewrote what they believed they saw. Your memory is not a recording device. It is a reconstruction algorithm, one that updates itself every time you recall something. The act of remembering is also the act of corrupting. The hippocampus, the brain's memory factory, is not a vault. It's a sculptor, continuously shaving down and adding new layers. That means the more you remember something, the further you drift from what actually occurred. Repetition doesn't reinforce memory. It distorts it. Now consider, if every memory you revisit becomes less true, what happens when you revisit a trauma, a triumph, a betrayal? Over time, do you remember the event or just the feeling slowly eating away at the original shape? And then ask, whose voice is narrating it now? Yours, or the culture that shaped you, the religion that named your sins, the ideology that painted your villains? Memory does not exist in isolation. It's infected by every input. One study found that people can develop entirely false memories of events that never happened just by being shown altered photos or being told a convincing lie. In another, participants remembered being lost in a shopping mall as children, after hearing a made-up account told by a family member. This isn't rare. It's systemic. You remember what feels emotionally congruent with your identity, not what's real. Think deeper. If memory is this unstable, what does that mean for your concept of self? Your self is stitched together from past experiences, but those are unstable data points. If the foundation is rot, then the entire structure of identity is a hallucination you've been reinforcing since birth. You say, I know who I am. But which version? The child who cried in class? The teenager who wanted to die? The adult who lied to someone they loved? The version who laughs too loudly to hide fear? Or the one who rehearses apologies they'll never say? You are not one thing. You are a timeline of fictions, a layering of stories, each told by a different narrator, none of them honest. You wear your past like a costume stitched from forgetting, denial, bias, and pain. Let's collapse it further. You may think memory fades because of time, but in many cases, it fades because your brain protects you. Trauma is often rewired as narrative, not erased, but shifted, twisted, just enough to let you continue living without falling apart. That's not healing. That's neural self-deception. You live by fictions not because you're weak, but because the truth is neurologically unsustainable. And here's where science becomes the scalpel. fMRI scans show that the same regions activated when imagining a future scenario are engaged when recalling a past one. Your brain cannot reliably distinguish between real memory and constructed fantasy, which means your regrets might never have happened. Your victories may be invented. The people you grieve could be figments of your private mythology. And if all that's true, your past is unstable, rewritten, emotional instead of accurate, then what is it you're calling you? What happens to your identity when you realize that your most sacred memories might be nothing more than emotionally charged lies? Who are you when you stop believing your own story? 3. Time doesn't exist, and you've never left this moment. You glance at the clock. You feel yourself aging. You remember yesterday. You anticipate tomorrow. But none of this is happening. You are trapped not in time, but in the illusion of time. And every second you believe in it, you sink further into a dream that never began and can never end. Physics has already pulled the trigger. In 1905, Einstein's theory of special relativity broke time into pieces. He proved that time is not constant, not objective, not ticking away in the background like some divine metronome. Time bends, stretches, slows, even halts depending on how fast you're moving, or how close you are to a gravitational field. Clocks moving at different speeds don't just appear to tick differently, they age differently. Time is not absolute. It is warped by perception, which means your now and someone else's now aren't just psychologically different. They are physically incompatible. Now, understand this. Einstein didn't stop there. He later confirmed something more disturbing, something he couldn't take back. According to the block universe theory, time is not something you move through. All moments past, present, future already exist. Simultaneously, eternally, your birth, your death, the conversations you regret, the ones you haven't had yet. They're all locked in the geometry of space-time. You're not moving forward. You're stuck. The past isn't behind you. The future isn't ahead. Everything just is. You are not progressing. You are simply experiencing one slice of a frozen infinity, believing it to be now because your brain needs linearity to stay sane. But ask yourself, if every moment already exists, why do you feel motion? Because your consciousness is a projector, not a passenger. It doesn't ride time, it constructs it like film on a reel. The frames are already there, but you, the observer, are trapped watching them in a forced sequence. That sequence is not real. It's neurological momentum, the illusion that there's a before and an after. The experiment has already been run. In 1979, physicist Julian Barber argued that time is not fundamental to the universe, it's an emergent property of change. In simpler terms, the universe doesn't have time. It just has states, configurations, arrangements of matter. Time is just what you call the transition between them. It's a name you give to change because you can't comprehend stasis. But stasis is the truth, not motion, not decay, just existence, all at once. In silence, even neuroscience agrees. When you experience the present, your brain is processing information from milliseconds ago. Visual input lags. Sound arrives asynchronously. Reaction follows perception. What you call now is already gone. Always. You're not living in the present. You're living in the residue of the past, a ghost of light, bouncing inside a skull too slow to keep up. You are always too late for your own life. So what then is the future? You plan for it, fear it, chase it. But the future is a fiction your brain constructs to simulate hope or terror emotions, designed to guide biological survival. The future is useful, but it's not real, which leaves you with one unbearable truth. There is only this moment, not because it's sacred, but because it's all there ever was, or ever will be. But even this now is a trick. Your now is already memory. It's already over. It's already another narrative to cling to while you fall through a static universe of unchangeable truths. You can't escape time because you were never inside it. So when you remember a better past, or dread a darker future, you're not reacting to reality. You're reacting to a structure your mind built to keep itself from unraveling. But now the unraveling has begun. If you've never moved through time, if every choice has already happened, if the end already exists and you're simply catching up to it, then what does freedom mean? What does regret mean? What does becoming even mean? And most of all, what is the purpose of consciousness in a reality that no longer needs you to move through it? For you've never made a choice. Free will is a ritual of self-deception. You feel it every day, that flicker of agency. The pause before you speak, the fork in the road, the breath you hold before deciding yes or no. You think, this is me, this is mine, I choose. But that flicker is not freedom. It's a post hoc illusion, surgically stitched into your awareness after the machinery has already moved. Let's dismantle the myth of free will from the inside. In 1983, neuroscientist Benjamin Libet performed a groundbreaking experiment that should have ended the conversation. Subjects were asked to move their wrist whenever they felt the urge and to record the moment they became aware of that urge. Meanwhile, their brain activity was being monitored. The results, the brain's readiness, potentially its decision to act, was measurable up to 500 milliseconds before the subject became conscious of the choice. Your brain decides before you know. You've decided. Your awareness is an afterthought. You are not the author of your thoughts. You are the narrator of a play already written, pretending it's improv. Libet's findings were only the beginning. Decades later, fMRI studies went further. In some cases, scientists could predict a subject's decision up to 7 seconds before the subject was even aware of it. Not guess, not infer. Predict with startling accuracy. The implications are devastating. Free will is not just weak. It may not exist at all, but you already know this. You didn't choose your gender, your genetics, your neurology. You didn't choose the language that shaped your thoughts, or the culture that defined your truths, or the traumas that rewired your brain in ways you still don't understand. You didn't choose the dreams that haunt you. You didn't choose the things you crave. You didn't choose the thoughts you wish you never had. And still, you claim agency. You say, but I chose how to react. No, your reaction is the output of 1,000 silent variables, each beyond your control. Serotonin levels, childhood triggers, social pressures, unconscious pattern recognition. You felt like you chose, but your feelings are the most easily manipulated part of you. Ask yourself, when you feel angry, do you choose that emotion, or do you notice it after it erupts? When you fall in love, do you decide to, or do you rationalize it after your body has already surrendered? You are a story written by chemicals. Your you is a collection of processes, neurons firing, hormones released, environmental cues interpreted by mechanisms you didn't design. Yet you insist that there is a self inside steering the wheel, but there is no wheel, no driver, only directionless inertia pretending to be choice. And yet, here's the cruel twist. The belief in free will is evolutionarily beneficial. Studies show people who believe in free will are more motivated, more resilient, more willing to suffer for delayed rewards. So your brain lies to you. Constantly, it creates the sensation of agency. Not because it's true, but because it's useful for survival, which means your most sacred feeling that you are a self. Making choices as a hallucination optimized for reproductive advantage. You're not free. You're just convinced that pretending to be free keeps you from collapsing. But what does morality mean without free will? What does justice mean? What does guilt mean if every crime was an inevitability, coded in neurotransmitters, shaped by trauma, triggered by noise? If you've never made a choice, if your entire life is a loop of decisions already written in the electrical chaos of a brain you didn't build, then what are you? Not a soul, not a self, just a sequence. So ask yourself, honestly, if you don't choose your thoughts, your desires, your beliefs, or your emotions, if every word you say is simply the next domino falling, then what was ever you in the first place? 5. Your identity is a costume you forgot you were wearing. You say your name aloud. You list your traits. You describe yourself as an artist, a thinker, a survivor. You believe these words hold meaning, that they trace the contours of some authentic you, but they don't. They are masks layered upon masks, designed to shield you from the unbearable truth. You are nothing beneath a story. Let's peel back what you call identity. You were not born with it. You were assigned it by your parents' language, your culture's symbols, the gaze of others. Before you spoke, others spoke you into being. They called you good or bad, male or female, gifted or slow, believer or skeptic. You didn't choose these categories. They chose you, and you never recovered. Psychologists call it social construction. You are not a person. You are a response to how others expected you to behave. A looping adaptation to an environment made of judgments, comparisons, and roles. From the moment you gained consciousness, you were taught to see yourself through the eyes of others. This is called the looking glass self, a term from sociologist Charles Cooley. You see your worth not directly, but as a reflection of how you believe others perceive you. Your self-image is a feedback loop. You are always performing, always adjusting, always hiding behind the performance, and eventually you forgot you were performing. Think about this. If every aspect of your personality was formed in reaction to your surroundings, your likes, your fears, your defenses, then what was ever truly yours? Even the quirks you cling to, the things you call just who I am, are often coping mechanisms fossilized into personality. That sarcasm, a shield. That ambition, a trauma response. That quietness, a scar shaped into silence. You wear your wounds like ornaments and call them character. But identity goes deeper than psychology. Neuroscience has already gutted the idea of a stable self. In split-brain patients, those whose corpus callosum has been severed, two separate hemispheres operate independently. One side of the brain doesn't know what the other is doing, and yet each constructs explanations for the other's behavior. Confabulation, invention. The brain will lie to itself rather than admit confusion. So which side is you? The left, the right, the storyteller, or the actor? You are not a unified consciousness. You are a chorus of competing processes, pretending to sing in harmony. Your thoughts, feelings, memories, they do not emerge from one center. They collide, and your brain builds a post hoc narrative to smooth out the noise. You are not a self. You are a simulation of coherence. And yet, you cling to the illusion. Why? Because the alternative is unbearable. To know that you is just a placeholder, a role played by biology, culture, memory, and chance. The Buddhists knew this. They called it unnata, no self. The idea that the ego is a mirage, that clinging to identity is the root of suffering. That freedom only comes when you let go of the lie. But you won't let go, because without identity, who grieves? Who dreams? Who gets justice? And yet the collapse continues. In 2005, psychologist Bruce Hood demonstrated that people are reluctant to swap belongings with identical duplicates, replacing their childhood teddy bear with a perfect copy. Why? Because they believe the object contains something essential, something unique, a soul, but it's just atoms, and so are you. You are not your memories. Those shift, you are not your personality. That bends, you are not your thoughts. Those lie, so what remains? A name, a face, a history. Or just an echo wearing a mask so long it forgot there was nothing underneath. If identity is a mask, and you can no longer tell when the performance ends, was there ever a person underneath to begin with? 6. Language is a cage, and every thought you've had was pre-routine. You think you're thinking. You believe your mind is yours, that your ideas are original, that your inner voice is crafting something new. But that voice isn't yours. It was installed line by line, rule by rule, by a system designed not to reveal truth, but to contain it. Language is not a tool, it is a prison. Consider this: infants cry, gesture, feel, but they do not think in language. They perceive directly. Language arrives later, like a parasite offering order in exchange for something deeper: your ability to sense without filtering. From the moment you learned words, you stopped seeing the world. You began naming it. That bird is not a bird. Bird is a sound symbol, a reduction, a linguistic shortcut that kills complexity. The fluttering fractal miracle of that animal becomes 5 dead letters. Bayard, say it enough times, and you forget you ever saw the thing itself. You now see the label, not the life. Philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein put it plainly: the limits of my language mean the limits of my world. You can't think what you can't say, and so your reality is boxed by vocabulary. If a language has no word for guilt, can its speakers feel guilt? If it has no future tense, can it imagine destiny? If your tongue lacks nuance for silence, how do you hear stillness? You are linguistically amputated. You don't know it, because you've never existed outside the system that cut you. Let's go further. Studies in linguistic relativity. Those on the Pirahu, people of the Amazon, show that some tribes have no concept of numbers beyond a few. No fixed words for past or future. No narratives in the way we understand them. These people do not tell their lives as stories. They live outside narrative time. You call them primitive, but perhaps they're unshackled. Now consider all as fiction, but as prophecy. In 1984, Newspeak wasn't just censorship, it was reality control. Remove a word, and you erase the thought that depended on it. Destroy freedom, and no one can rebel. Reduce emotion to double plus good, and passion dies. What makes you think your language isn't doing the same? You say love, but that word has no precision. It is used for God and for chocolate. for desire and for dependence. You say, truth, but truth in whose grammar, whose metaphor, whose frame? You believe you're thinking freely, but you're playing a game with rules you didn't write. Grammar is law, syntax is architecture. Even your logic, your very capacity for reasoners, shaped by the linguistic paths available to you. You follow grooves carved by dead philosophers and ancient tribes. You speak inside a maze you didn't design, chasing thoughts that can only run along permitted corridors. And what happens when you try to escape? Try to describe an emotion without metaphor. Try to imagine a color you've never seen. Try to think something for which no word exists. You can't. Language is a virus, and your mind is infected. Every sentence you speak reinforces its rules. Every conversation is a ritual of obedience. Even rebellion happens in its grammar. So what is thought? You believe it is pure. But thought, in your case, is internalized speech. Your mind whispers in words, and you confuse that for intelligence. But what if the wisest things can't be said at all? What if truth lives in silence, and language is the veil that keeps you from ever touching it? You are not the speaker, you are the echo, and if all your thoughts are pre-written, if your dreams are built from borrowed syllables, if your inner world is just a reflection of an outer linguistic cage, then what were you ever thinking? 7. History is a consensus hallucination, and you've been dreaming someone else's dream. You think the past is solid. You think it happened, that there was a Rome, a Jesus, a Napoleon, that dates are fixed, that timelines are linear, that the stories you've been told rest on evidence. But history is not memory. It is mythology, canonized by the victors and embalmed in ink. Let's begin with the question: who writes history? Not the dead, not the defeated, not the silenced. History is written by those with the power to preserve their version and the power to erase yours. In 1937, Orwell said it best: "He who controls the past controls the future. He who controls the present controls the past." That wasn't a metaphor. That was a manual. Let's descend. You were taught that the Library of Alexandria was destroyed. What you weren't taught is that no one knows how. Was it Caesar, the Caliph? A slow erosion across centuries. What we do know is this: tens of thousands of texts, maps, treatises, languages disappeared without a trace. Gone. And with them, the version of reality they preserved. We are told civilization advanced. But in that fire or fires we lost unknown sciences, unknown philosophies, unknown cultures that might have redefined what progress even means. You call what came after history, but what if it was a reset? And then consider the timeline you trust. The Dark Ages are so named because of a lack of reliable records, not necessarily because nothing happened. And yet, we fill those centuries with assumptions. We project stability onto gaps. We fill silence with myth and call it fact. Look at the ancient maps. The Peary Race Map, 1513, shows parts of South America and an ice-free Antarctic coastline, long before their official discovery. Who mapped these regions, and how? Modern scholars shrugged. Conspiracy, or simply a history too inconvenient to remember. But the cracks are deeper. In 1991, Russian mathematician Anatoly Fomenko proposed that much of recorded history is fabricated, layered over itself like a palimpsest. He wasn't a fringe theorist. He was a PhD, a topologist. His new chronology theory argues that events from antiquity were duplicated and renamed, that ancient Rome, medieval Europe, and Byzantine history may be reflections of the same events, distorted and rebranded. You don't need to accept Fomenko. You only need to accept the possibility that repetition, error, and narrative utility shaped more of history than truth ever did. Even now, facts are unstable. Look up the same historical event in 10 different languages, and you'll find 10 different versions. Ask 2 countries about the same war. Ask 2 religions about the same prophet. Ask 2 survivors about the same genocide. History is not a timeline. It's a battlefield of memory, where silence is ammunition. And then there's collective false memory, the Mandela effect. Entire populations remember things that never happened. A dead Mandela, a different Berenstain Bears, an alternate geography. Most dismiss it as misremembering. But what if you are witnessing glitches in consensus reality? If thousands of minds remember something that didn't occur, then what is the truth? The archived record, or the unexplainable convergence of memory? And what is memory without evidence? Your textbooks are not neutral. They are political artifacts. What gets preserved is not what's true, but what's useful. Useful for control, for pride, for shame, for obedience. And so, generation after generation, you inherit a dream where kings were noble, revolutions were just, borders were natural, and genocide was unfortunate but inevitable. A dream where the victors are always on the right side of time. A dream so deeply embedded that to question it feels like heresy. Even if your bones whisper that something's wrong, but the truth is colder. You are not the product of a past. You are the hostage of a narrative. And if your past is fiction, if your culture was built on forgetting, if the ruins beneath your feet are speaking a language no one dares translate, then what part of you still believes you were ever awake? 8. Consciousness is not yours. It's a field you're mistaking for a self-you. Think your thoughts originate from inside, that there's a center, a glowing core, a private you observing the world from behind your eyes. But there is no center. There is no container. There is no owner. What you call consciousness may not be a possession at all. It may be a field, a current, and you're just a temporary wrinkle in it. Let's begin where the illusion begins. The ego in Western psychology. The ego is seen as the self, the rational decider, the inner voice, the executive function. But in Eastern traditions, the ego is the problem, hallucination of separateness that causes suffering. And in neuroscience, things are more brutal. The ego is not real. It's a process, not a person. A narrative interface built to stabilize. A chaotic brain. You are a storm pretending to be a statue. Let's go further. Studies of default mode network DMN activity in the brain show that your sense of self is just a pattern of neural firing. Strongest when you're not focused outward. You're daydreaming, self-reflecting. Shut down this network through meditation, psychedelics, or trauma, and the self evaporates. People report the same thing. Ego death, the collapse of boundaries, the feeling that consciousness continues, but without a you. This isn't poetic. It's in fMRI studies of subjects on psilocybin or DMT, DMN activity drops dramatically, and with it, the sensation of individual identity, yet awareness persists, feeling persists, experience persists, which means you don't generate consciousness. You localize it, just as a radio doesn't create music, it receives it to maybe tuning into consciousness, not producing it. This is the panpsychist view, recently gaining traction even among physicists and philosophers. Thinkers like Christoph Koch and Giulio Tononi suggest consciousness may be a fundamental feature of the universe, not an emergent one, like gravity or time or mass, not produced by the brain, but channeled through it. The philosopher David Chalmers calls it the hard problem. How does subjective experience arise from matter? No one can answer it, not yet. Not with any model of physics or biology. We can describe correlates what lights up in the brain when you feel, but we cannot explain why it feels like anything. That why remains untouched. Ominous, possibly. Unanswerable. Now, here's the fracture. If consciousness is not produced, but received, then who are you? Are you a soul, a signal, a passing arrangement of flesh tuned to a particular channel of awareness? You may say, I feel like I'm me. But the feeling of selfhood is the very thing being questioned. Illusion doesn't feel like illusion from the inside. You say, but I have continuity. I remember yesterday. But your memories are neurochemical shadows. Your sleep every night proves discontinuity. Your dreams remind you, awareness flickers, identity wobbles. You return not because you were sustained, but because the machine booted up again. You think you are consciousness. But what if you are merely the interface consciousness is using a temporary face through which the field peers into form? What if you are not a wave in the ocean, but the illusion of separation between wave and sea? This view isn't spiritual, it's existential. It strips away every layer of personal ownership. You do not own your thoughts. You do not own your attention. You are not even the witness. You are the watched art, and this explains the fear. Because if consciousness is not yours, if it is a process, a pattern, a field, if your you is just a temporary name for a structure, soon to decay, then who is reading these words? Who is asking these questions? And when that you dissolves, what, if anything, remains to remember it ever existed? 9. Death already happened. You're just watching the playback. You live your life as if death waits at the end, a future event, a final punctuation. But what if it already happened? What if everything after that moment, this moment, is just a rerun, flickering on the screen of a consciousness that can't tell the difference between presence and echo? Let's begin with the physiology. When the body dies, it doesn't shut off like a machine. There is a delay. Brain activity persists for minutes, sometimes hours. In 2017, Canadian doctors monitoring terminal ICU patients discovered brainwaves continued even after all signs of life had ceased. No pulse, no blood pressure, yet the brain kept signaling. What are those final bursts? Are they the brain's last attempt at coherence? Or are they the beginning of something else, a trapped feedback loop of memory and time, simulating life from the inside? Let's go further. In the moments before death, the brain floods with DMT, an intense psychedelic compound that dissolves ego and warps time perception. Users report eternity, reliving entire lifetimes, seeing all events at once, encountering landscapes that feel more real than reality. This isn't mysticism, it's neurochemistry. And if these floods occur in your final seconds, then who's to say you're not in that loop now? What if this, your life, your regrets, your memory of this morning, is a final hallucination stretched across milliseconds, unfolding as an elaborate dream during the chemical cascade of brain death? Time feels linear, but we've already dismantled that. Self feels continuous, but we've already exposed its instability. What's left to guarantee you're alive right now, and not in the echo of your own ending? Now consider this. In near-death experiences, thousands report the same patterns. Tunnels of light, life reviews, the collapsing of moments into one. Across cultures, across beliefs, across neurological profiles. These aren't religious fictions. They're patterns of perception under extreme stress, the brain's final project, a recursive fractal of identity as it dissolves into nothing. But what if the life review never ends? What if you're still inside it, watching yourself? Watch yourself, playing back each choice, each failure, each love, one simulated frame at a time. What if this is not your life? What if this is your death, looping through the false comfort of one more chance, one more memory, one more breath? You think death is coming, but entropy already reached you. You were stardust rearranged into carbon. Your atoms were once inside other bodies, other stars. The idea that you began at birth is a lie. You began long before, and you've ended already. This, the thinking, the typing, the remembering, is afterglow. A ghost doesn't know it's a ghost. It walks familiar paths, speaks to people who no longer see it, insists on its presence long after the house is emptied. That's what you're doing now. You're going through the motions of a self that's no longer necessary. And what about déjà vu? That creeping sensation that this moment has already happened. Science calls it a misfire, a memory glitch. But if all moments are simultaneous, if your consciousness is stuck in a collapsed loop, then déjà vu isn't error, it's recognition. You've seen this scene before. You've said these words before. You've died before. So ask yourself, if you can't prove that this moment isn't memory, or echo, or chemical illusion, if the boundaries of death have already been crossed, if the life you're experiencing is just the final flicker of a candle that went out years ago, then why are you still pretending to be alive? 10. Free will was an advertising slogan, and you bought it. To wake up, you stretch, you decide to get out of bed. You think you chose that. But what if every movement, every thought, every decision you've ever made was not a choice, but a result, a domino pushed by thousands before it? A reaction dressed in the illusion of intention. Let's begin with the science. In the 1980s, neuroscientist Benjamin Libet conducted an experiment that detonated the foundations of free will. He asked participants to move their hands whenever they felt like it, and report the moment they made the decision. Meanwhile, he measured their brain activity. The results were staggering. The brain's motor cortex activated up to 7 seconds. Before the subject felt they had decided, the brain decided, then told you a story. This finding has since been repeated, expanded, refined. Studies using EEG, fMRI, and intracranial recordings all converge on the same outcome. The brain initiates action before the conscious mind is aware. The feeling of will is a post hoc narrative. Free will, as you experience it, is a lagging interface. A glorified caption on a film already playing. Still think you're in control. Let's go deeper. Psychologist Daniel Wegner studied the illusion of conscious will, arguing that our experience of agency is retroactively stitched into memory. We believe we willed an action because the thought preceded the action, not because it caused it. This is a logical fallacy, correlation, masquerading as causation. You feel responsible because that feeling keeps society stable, but feeling is not proof. You didn't choose your genetics. You didn't choose your culture. You didn't choose the traumas that wired your nervous system into its current shape. You didn't choose your desires, they arose. You didn't choose your fears, they were installed. So what did you choose? The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer said it best. Man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills. Even the idea of choice is contaminated. Your thoughts arise, unbidden, like weather. You don't control the wind. You only react to it. Now, consider this. What if your entire self is just a predictive model? Modern neuroscience suggests the brain is a prediction machine, not a perceiver of reality, but a builder of it. Your sense of self, your preferences, even your emotions are forecasts based on prior data. You are predicting yourself into existence, moment by moment. The model feels like you, but it isn't you. It's a simulation you mistake for freedom, and even this moment, reading these words was inevitable, because the moment before led here, and the moment before that led there. And at no point did you stop the chain. You only believed you could. Now look at society. It demands you act like you have free will. Even when every scientific discipline from physics to neuroscience to evolutionary biologies screams that you don't. Why? Because responsibility is easier to assign than complexity is to accept. A world without free will is horrifying. It means you are not guilty, but you're not innocent either. You are a conduit, a puppet whose strings are made of DNA, upbringing, trauma, and time. So if you're not the one pulling the strings, who is? And if no one is, if the universe is just a chain of causality running on autopilot, then what is the purpose of pretending to be the pilot? 11. You've never seen the present, only its ghost right now. You think you are here, reading, processing, existing, but you aren't in the present. You've never been. You are always lagging behind, reacting to shadows, echoes, fragments, already past. Let's break that illusion. In 1994, neuroscientist David Eagleman revealed a strange temporal fact. The brain doesn't perceive time in real time. Instead, it collects incoming stimuli over 80 milliseconds, then packages it into a single experience of now. This creates a delay, a fabricated present. You are always living 80 milliseconds in the past. The present you believe in is a simulation reconstructed, smoothed, and delivered after the fact. Even your sight is a lie. Photons hit your eyes, triggering biochemical reactions that travel through the optic nerve. This data gets processed by the visual cortex before it becomes an image. That takes time. Everything you see has already happened. When you clap your hands, you think you hear the sound as you see it. But the sound moves faster through air than the light through your neural pathways. The brain aligns them artificially. The world you live in is a post-processed hallucination. This means the real you, the unedited, unfiltered, raw sensorium does not exist in experience. Only the cleaned-up playback does. You're not alive in the moment. You're just watching the cut footage. The philosopher Immanuel Kant warned us. We never see the thing in itself, only phenomena, appearances filtered through our perception. Modern neuroscience simply adds, you see nothing directly. You experience a deeply processed guess, so ask yourself, if you never access the present, if you're always interacting with a calculated mirage, then how do you know you're not still reliving yesterday? Time, as physics understands it, doesn't flow. There is no master clock ticking forward. Einstein shattered that illusion. In 1905, according to special relativity, all time exists simultaneously, past, present, and future, like a frozen block. The passage of time is not fundamental. What you experience as now is just your brain's location in the timeline. Now, consider this. If time doesn't move, and perception is delayed, then you are always misaligned. You are out of sync with reality itself. What you call now is just your brain's edited rerun of something it couldn't catch in time. And when the brain gets confused, when the timing falls apart, reality collapses. Patients with temporal lobe epilepsy report time freezing, looping, slowing, or ceasing altogether. They become trapped in fractured presence. Moments repeat, seconds stretch. Nothing flows. These are not hallucinations. They are the breakdown of the mechanism that creates the illusion of now. And when it fails, the curtain drops. Let's go even deeper. If the present is a guess, and the future doesn't exist yet, and the past is only memory, then what are you? A composite of false impressions, a being never actually here. So what happens when the lag grows? What if the brain's ability to synchronize degrades due to aging, trauma, neurological decay? Then time starts slipping. Moments stop aligning. You speak and hear your voice a second later. You walk into a room and forget why you entered. You begin living in a world where everything feels off, delayed, uncanny. This is the brain failing to construct now. This is temporal derealization. You are not drifting through time. You are being slowly unsynced from it. You were never designed to perceive reality, only to survive it. So if now is a lie, and you only exist within now, then what exactly is reading these words? 12. Memory is a story you've been forced to believe. Think your memories are yours. You think they're accurate, yours alone, intimate, reliable. But memory is not a vault. It's a script rewritten every time you open it. And most of it was never written by you. Let's begin with the simplest horror. Your brain doesn't store memories like files. It reconstructs them. Every single time you remember something, your brain recreates the experience and contaminates it with current emotions, context, bias, an expectation. Every act of remembering is an act of distortion. Cognitive psychologist Elizabeth Loftus proved this beyond doubt in the 1970s and 80s. She demonstrated that false memories could be implanted, not just minor details, but entire fabricated events. People could be led to believe they'd been lost in a mall as a child, even though it never happened. And once the memory felt real, it became real, emotionally, neurologically, experientially. You are not recalling your past. You are hallucinating it. Now consider how easily you're manipulated. Media, repetition, narrative, trauma, time, all change the color and shape of what you remember. In one study, subjects were shown footage of a car crash. One group was asked, how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other? Another group heard the word bumped. Those who heard smashed recalled the cars moving faster. And some even remembered broken glass that wasn't there. A single word changed reality. Because memory is never past. It's rebuilt in the present, over and over, until it becomes fiction. Even your most sacred, emotional memories, the moment you fell in love, the time someone hurt you, the time you hurt someone else, are not preserved events. They are narratives you've reauthored under emotional duress. Now mix in trauma. Traumatic memories are the most vivid and the most fragmented, stored not as clean narratives, but in sensory shards, smells, colors, sounds, flashes. The brain's hippocampus, responsible for narrative memory, often shuts down during extreme stress, while the amygdala, the emotional center, goes into overdrive. The result, you remember the burn but not the fire, the scream but not the reason. You live haunted by feelings you can't trace, memories without story, just pain. And the brain, desperate for explanation, fills in the gaps. So you invent reasons for why you are the way you are, and you believe them. But what if the most important memories you carry were never even yours? Research in epigenetics shows trauma can be passed down generationally. Your grandmother's fear, your great-grandfather's rage, chemically coded into your DNA. You're haunted by ghosts of memories you never had. And then there's cultural memory, national myths, religious narratives, family legends, childhood bedtime stories. They worm their way into your brain before you even know what memory is. You didn't remember those things. They were remembered for you. You were taught how to remember, taught what to forget, taught which moments were sacred and which didn't matter. So when you say, "This is who I am, I remember," what you're really saying is, "This is who I've been told to be. I've internalized the myth." And when you recall your first heartbreak, or your childhood bedroom, or the first time someone looked at you like you mattered, are you remembering it, or repainting it with the colors of who you wish you had been? Because if every memory is rewritten by the present, and the present is constructed by memory, then what part of you was ever real to begin with? 13. The language you think with is not your own. Every thought you've ever had has been whispered to you in a voice that doesn't belong to you. Not God's, not fate's, just language. But you never chose your language. It was forced into you before you knew how to resist. You cried, and the world answered, not in truth, but in words, in structures, in syntax, systems built by people long dead, carrying the weight of empires, wars, cultures, and categories that no longer exist. Every word you use is a program, and every sentence is a command to think in a certain way. This isn't poetic. It's neurological. Your inner voice, the one you think with, is constructed from the outer voices you heard growing up. Parents, teachers, culture. It's a loop of borrowed phrases, internalized judgments, recycled shame. And when you call it your thoughts, what you really mean is your training. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, still debated but never disproven, suggests that *** language doesn't just express thought, it limits it. People who speak different languages perceive reality differently. Some languages have no future tense, so their speakers think about time in circular rhythms. Some have no word for left or right. They think only in cardinal directions. They don't say your left foot. They say your southwest foot. Now consider this. If your language doesn't have a word for a concept, can you truly think it? What ideas have you never had? Because English, or Urdu, or Arabic, or whatever tongue was nailed into your mind, never gave you the tools to conceive them. Ludwig Wittgenstein said, "The limits of my language mean the limits of my world." So, what is your world if the words you've inherited are infected with ideology? Think of madness. Think of normal. Think of sin, love, freedom, terrorism, success, God. Each one a trap, 1,000 meanings stacked beneath a single label. Each one handed to you as a weapon or a leash, depending on who said it. You don't define words, they define you. Even the word I is a trick. There is no central self behind that pronoun, just a collapsing series of emotional states strung together by language, pretending to be a spine. And then you wonder why you can't describe your own suffering, why certain traumas feel beyond words, because they are. Because the language you were given was never built to hold them. Your silence isn't a choice. It's a symptom of colonialism, of patriarchy, of epistemicide. The murder of entire knowledge systems, cultures, and emotional vocabularies in the name of civilization. Entire worlds have been lost because they had no place in your grammar. Even your emotions have been named for you. You say you feel guilt, shame, envy, joy, but these are inherited labels placed on sensations too ancient and complex to be reduced. You're trying to pour oceans into wine glasses. You were not born thinking in words. You were born screaming in sensation. Language came later, and with it, the great compression of self into meaning. What if you had no language? What if you could not label your thoughts? Would you feel freer? Or would you realize you've never had a thought at all, only phrases stitched together by ghosts? You've made it this far. That means something inside you is already cracking. These weren't just theories, they were warnings, buried under history, silence, and sleep. But this is only the beginning. Want more? Continue the descent. More forgotten ideas, more disturbing truths, more of everything you were never supposed to think. Subscribe, follow, stay awake. You're not here by accident. You've already started falling. Now the only question is, how deep are you willing to go?